Good evening, love. It is day number 2, and my nose is itchy. I picked out a book today, and I don't know what you can tell by the cover, because you may have read the other one. I'm not 100% on which one I gave you again, although I think I gave you The Golden Key. This is The Light Princess by by George MacDonald, with pictures by Maurice Sendak. So I'm going to show the pictures because Maurice Sendak is pretty rad. Either way, let's start with chapter 1 of The Light Princess. Chapter 1. What? No children? Once upon a time, so long ago that I have quite forgotten the date, there lived a king and a queen who had no children. And the king said to himself, all the queens of my acquaintance have children, some 3, some 7, and some as many as 12, and my queen has not one. I feel ill-used. So he made up his mind to cross his life without it. But she was bore on like a good patient queen she was, and the king grew very cross indeed. But the queen pretended to take it all as a joke, and a very good one too. Why don't you have any daughters at least, he said. I don't say sons, that might be too much to expect. I am sure, dear king, I am very sorry, said the queen. So you ought to be, retorted the king. You are not going to make a virtue of that, surely. But he was not ill-tempered king, and in any matter of less moment would have let the queen have her own way with all his heart. This, however, was an affair of state. The queen smiled. You must have patience with the lady, you know, dear king, said she. She was indeed a very nice queen, and heartily sorry that she could not oblige the king immediately. Chapter 2. Won't I just? The king tried to have patience, but he succeeded very badly. It was more than he deserved, therefore, when at last the queen gave him a daughter, a lovely little princess as ever cried. The day drew near when the infant must be christened. The king wrote all the invitations with his own hand. Of course, somebody was forgotten. Now, it does not generally matter if somebody is forgotten, only you must mind who. Unfortunately, the king forgot without intending to forget, and so the chance fell upon Princess Macamnoir, which was awkward. For the princess was the king's own sister, and he ought to have not forgotten her. But she had made herself so disagreeable to the old king, their father, and she had forgotten her in making his will, and so it was no wonder that her brother forgot about her in writing his invitations. But poor relations don't do anything to keep you in mind of them. Why don't they? The king could not see into the garret she lived in, could he? She was a sour, spiteful creature. The wrinkles of contempt crossed the wrinkles of peevishness and made her face as full of wrinkles as a pat of butter. If ever a king could be justified in forgetting anybody, this king was justified in forgetting his sister, even at a christening. She looked very odd, too. Her forehead was as large as all the rest of her face, and projected over like a precipice. When she was angry, her little eyes flashed blue, and when she hated somebody, they shone yellow and green. What they looked like when she loved anybody, I do not know, for I have never heard of her loving anybody but herself, and I do not think she could have managed that if she had not somehow got used to herself. But what makes it hardly imprudent in the king to forget her was that she was awfully clever. In fact, she was a witch, and when she bewitched anybody, he very soon had enough of it, for she beat all the wicked fairies in wickedness, and all the clever ones in cleverness. She despised all the modes we read in history in which offended fairies and witches have taken their revenge, and therefore, after waiting and waiting in vain for an invitation, she made up her mind at last to go without one, and make the whole family miserable, like the princess she was. So she put on her best gown, went to the palace, was kindly received by happy monarch, who forgot that he had forgotten her, and took her place in the procession into the royal chapel. When they were all gathered about the font, she contrived to get next to it, and throw something into the water, after which she maintained a very respectful demeanour till the water was applied to the child's face. But at that moment she turned around in her place 3 times, and muttered the following words, loud enough for those beside her to hear. Light of spirit, by my charms, light of body, every part, never weary human arms, only crush thy parents' heart. Though all thought she had lost her wits, and was repeating some foolish nursery rhyme. A shudder went through the whole of them notwithstanding. The baby, on the contrary, began to laugh and crow, while the nurse gave a start and a smothered cry, for she thought she was struck with paralysis. She could not feel the baby in her arms, but she clasped it tight and said nothing. The mischief was done. Chapter 3. She can't be ours. Her atrocious aunt had deprived the child of all her gravity. If you ask me how this was effected, I answer, in the easiest way in the world. She only had to destroy gravitation. For the princess was a philosopher, and knew all the ins and outs of the laws of gravitation, as well as the ins and outs of her bootlays. As well as being a witch, she would abrogate those laws in a moment, or at least to clog their wheels and rust their bearings, that they would not work at all. But we have more to do with what followed than how it was done. And here's the picture by Marie Stendek. The light is probably not right for it, but you can see she has an enormous head and everything else about it. The first awkwardness that resulted from this unhappy privation was that the moment the nurse began to let go, that the moment the nurse began to float the baby up and down, she flew from her arms toward the ceiling. Happily, the resistance of the air brought her ascending career to close within a foot of it. There she remained, horizontal as when she left the nurse's arms, kicking and laughing amazingly. The nurse, in terror, flew to the bell, begged the footman who answered to bring up the house steps directly. Trembling in every limb, she climbed up upon the steps, and had to stand upon the very top and reach out before she could catch the floating tail of the baby's long clothes. When the strange fact came to be known, there was a terrible commotion in the palace. The occasion of its discovery by the king was naturally a repetition of the nurse's experience. Astonished that he felt no weight when the child was laid in his arms, and as he began to wave her up and not down, for slowly she ascended to the ceiling as before. And there remained, floating in perfect comfort and satisfaction, as was testified by her peals of tiny laughter. The king stood staring up in speechless amazement and trembled so that his beard shook like the grass in the wind. At last, turning himself to the queen, who was just as horror-struck as himself, he said, gasping, staring and stammering, "She can't be ours, queen." Oh, sorry, that was probably a little silly. "She can't be ours, queen." Now the queen was much cleverer than the king, who had begun already to suspect that this effect defective came by cause. "I am sure she's ours," answered she, "but we ought to have her taken care of her at the christening. People who were never invited ought not to have been present." "Oh," said the king, tapping his forehead with his finger. "I forgot it all. I have it all. I found her out. Don't you see it, queen? Princess Macanois has bewitched her." "That's just what I say," answered the queen. "I beg your pardon, my love, I did not hear you. John, bring the steps, and I get on my throne with." For he was a little king with a great throne, like many other kings. The throne steps were brought and set upon the dining table, and John got up on the top of them, but he could not reach the little princess, who lay like a baby laughing cloud in the air, exploding continuously. "Take the tongs, John," said his majesty, and getting up on the table, he handed them to him. John could reach the baby now, and the little princess was handed down by the tongs. We'll read more of it tomorrow. In the meantime, I love you dearly. Things are sort of shaping up over here, but I'll write that to you in a big email. Well, faboosh mail. And yeah. I love you dearly. Sleep well, keep calm, find a llama carry on, and I'll be home soon. Good night, Christy. I love you.